You ever notice how life has a twisted way of testing your patience right when you think you've earned your peace? I'm 57 years old. My name is Jessica, and after everything I've survived in this life, I thought I finally deserved a little quiet. Yet here I am, telling you a story that still makes my blood heat like a kettle left too long on the stove. Before I dive in, tell me something. Where are you joining us from, and what time is it where you are? I ask because you might want to remember the moment you heard this, because what happened to me could have happened to you. And trust me, once you hear what was done to me, you'll understand exactly why I did what I did in return. You ever look at a person and feel something dark behind their smile? Something rotten they try to hide but the stink still rises. That's the feeling I had the very first time I met my son's mother-in-law. I didn't know then what she would eventually do. I didn't know she would humiliate me. I didn't know she would spit, yes, spit, on my plate like I was something she scraped off her shoe. But I felt something. Something off. Let me take you back. The day my son married that girl, I stood there in the front row, watching him look at her like she was the brightest thing God ever placed on this earth. And I was happy for him. I truly was. But the moment her mother approached me, oh, that was the moment everything shifted. She had this look, this cold little smirk, like she was doing me a favor by acknowledging my existence. And I thought, maybe she's nervous, maybe she's stiff, maybe I'm imagining things. But you know when you can sense a storm before the clouds even form? That was her. A storm. One I didn't know would eventually break right over my head. She took my hand that day, squeezed it too tightly, leaned in, and said, "Let's hope your son learns how to behave properly now. Marriage requires class." Class. As if my son was some wild animal she planned to tame. And you want to know the worst part? She said it while smiling for the wedding photographer. That should have told me everything. A person who can insult you while posing for a picture isn't someone you can trust. But I swallowed it. I let it go. Because I didn't want to ruin my son's day. Because sometimes, when you're a mother, you take the hit quietly. Or at least you think you do. The months after the wedding, I tried. I really tried. I invited my daughter-in-law's family over a few times, cooked meals, offered kindness. I thought that maybe time would smooth out whatever roughness existed between us. But that woman, my son's mother-in-law, she acted like stepping inside my home somehow lowered her status. Like she was too good for the chair she sat on. Too good for the food I made. Too good for the roof I worked my whole life to provide. And I didn't say anything. Not yet. You ever reach a point where you tell yourself, just let it go. This isn't worth a war? I was there. Right on that line. Right before she pushed me past it. The day everything exploded started out like any regular day. My son called, asking if we could host a small family dinner because they wanted to share some good news. I didn't know what kind of news it would be. I just felt happy they trusted me enough to host. I spent the afternoon seasoning chicken, kneading dough, and stirring sauces in pots big enough to feed an army. Cooking was always my peace. The rhythm calmed me. And as I cooked, I found myself thinking, maybe tonight will be different. Maybe tonight she'll show me even a thread of respect. But you know when your hopes start lifting right before someone stamps on them? That was me. A fool with a warm kitchen and a hopeful heart. They arrived right on time, my son glowing, my daughter-in-law smiling shyly, and behind them, the woman whose presence felt like a cold breeze slipping under a door. She walked in with that same smirk, scanning my home like she was assessing the damage in a place that barely met her standards. But I greeted them warmly. Because I'm 57, not 17. I know how to keep a peaceful table even when my hands itch to flip it. Dinner started off quietly. Too quietly. You ever sit at a table where the air feels thick enough to slice? My son made small talk, talked about work, and my daughter-in-law kept glancing at me as if she wanted to say something important. I kept waiting for the good news, but before she could open her mouth, her mother interrupted with a sharp, "Is this the best you could cook tonight, Jessica?" She said it while staring at the roasted chicken like it personally offended her. But still, I held my tongue. I said, "If there's something you'd prefer, I can make it." She gave this ugly little laugh. "You wouldn't know how to cook the foods I prefer." You know that feeling when the first crack forms in a dam? That was the first crack in me. I watched her pile food on her plate with a disgusted expression, like she was touching dirt. And I told myself, don't react, don't give her the satisfaction. But then everything shifted in a single second. A moment so deliberate, so humiliating, that it felt like someone turned the room cold. I had just placed my plate down. I hadn't even taken one bite. And she leaned forward, slow and smug, looking right into my eyes. And then she did it. She spat. Not accidentally. Not secretly. Directly on my plate. A glob of spit sitting right on the food I had spent hours preparing. For a moment, everything froze. My breath. My thoughts. My heartbeat. Everything. My son gasped. My daughter-in-law covered her mouth. And I just stared at that plate. At the spit. At the proof that this woman didn't just disrespect me, she wanted to break me. Crush me. Humiliate me in my own home. She leaned back, wiped her mouth, and said, "Oh dear, guess I couldn't help myself." Reflex. 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 A reflex is sneezing. A reflex is blinking. Spitting on someone's food? That's hatred. That's a declaration of war. I slowly lifted my gaze to her face. And she smiled. A cruel, taunting smile. She wanted me to explode. She wanted me to lose control so she could say, "See? This is why my daughter married beneath her." But I didn't explode. You ever feel something inside you snap so quietly, so cleanly, that even you don't notice it at first? That was the moment I felt it. The moment a cold, sharp clarity settled in my mind. The moment I knew she had just chosen the path we were about to walk. Because you don't spit on a woman like me and walk away unscathed. My son tried to stand up, outraged, but I held up my hand. And he stopped. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see if I'd scream, cry, throw something. But all I did was take that plate, lift it calmly, and walk it to the kitchen. But inside me, a storm was gathering. One she would never be ready for. When I came back, she was whispering something to my daughter-in-law, looking triumphant. And that was when my daughter-in-law tried to speak. "Mom, stop. You can't." But the woman waved her hand dismissively. Please. She needed to learn her place. Now she knows. Learn my place? I sat down. Slowly. Quietly. And with a smile so calm it frightened even me, I said, "You're right. I've learned something tonight." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what's that?" "That not all lessons are taught at the same table." She smirked like she had won something, like she had asserted dominance. But you ever see a person smile right before they're swallowed by their own shadow? That was her. And she didn't even know it. Because while she sat there feeling victorious, I was already building a plan in my mind. A plan as quiet as a whisper and as sharp as a blade. A plan that would leave her shaken to her core. But the first step wasn't revenge. It was patience. Because revenge isn't loud. It's not rushed. It's not messy. Revenge, real revenge, is served with the same patience as a simmering pot. Quiet at first, then boiling hot when the lid finally comes off. And that night, while they ate awkwardly, while my son whispered apologies, while that woman smirked triumphantly, my mind was already locking into place every detail I would need. Because if she thought spitting on my plate was the end of the story, she had no idea what story she had just started. And you're about to find out what a 57-year-old woman does when someone mistakes her kindness for weakness. You're about to see the kind of revenge that doesn't just settle a score, it carves a message so deep it can never be forgotten. But that comes next. Because the moment she spat on my plate, she didn't just insult me. She unlocked a version of me she never should have met. And trust me, the lesson I served her later that night, she never recovered from it. You ever sit in a room where everything looks the same, but nothing feels the same anymore? That was the air around me the moment I walked back from the kitchen, the image of her spit still burning itself into my memory like a stain you can't wash out. But instead of letting that anger boil over, I let it sink down, deep. Because that's where revenge grows best, far below the surface, where no one can hear it taking shape. She sat there at my dining table, shoulders back, chin lifted, eyes glittering like a woman who believed she had just won a battle no one else knew we were fighting. My son kept glancing between us, confused and hurt, my daughter-in-law silently pleading with her eyes for me to stay calm. But calm wasn't the right word for what I felt. Calm suggests stillness. What I felt was something else entirely. Something sharp. Something purposeful. Something waiting. I picked up my fork, but I didn't eat. Not a bite. I just watched her. Every smug twitch of her mouth. Every self-satisfied breath. Every drop of superiority she wore like perfume. She thought she'd humiliated me. She thought she'd put me in my place. But people like her never realize the danger of a quiet response. My son finally broke the silence. Mom. I'm so sorry. She shouldn't have. I cut him off. It's all right. He blinked. How can this be all right? I looked right at the woman who had spat on my food. Because tonight is far from over. She raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said gently, that the night always reveals more than the day does. Her smirk twitched, but she recovered quickly. The kind of person who lives off dominance doesn't expect the prey to grow fangs. We made our way through dinner, though my son and his wife barely touched their food. But the woman, oh, she ate everything on her plate with vicious satisfaction, even going back for seconds. Because nothing says arrogance like enjoying a meal in the home of the person you just disrespected. And then came the moment my son cleared his throat. Mom, we actually came tonight because we wanted to tell you something. I looked at him, softening only for him. What is it, sweetheart? My daughter-in-law took his hand and whispered, I'm pregnant. My heart jumped so hard I felt it in my throat. You're expecting. They both nodded, smiling like two kids afraid to hope I'd be as happy as they were. And I was. Oh, I was. The thought of becoming a grandmother lit something warm inside me. But right beside that warmth, something else flickered, something cold. Because as soon as the announcement slipped out, her mother scoffed loudly. Let's hope, she said, leaning back, the baby takes after our side of the family. We wouldn't want it inheriting bad manners. Bad manners. From the woman who spit on my plate. My daughter-in-law turned pale. Mom, stop. Why? She snapped. Someone here needs to speak the truth. I watched her talk, thinking how easy it was for her to toss insults like confetti, bright, messy, requiring someone else to clean up. But she didn't know that insulting me tonight wasn't just disrespect. It was a mistake. A fatal one. Because when a woman like me learns she's going to be a grandmother, she becomes even more protective. And the thought of that baby growing up with this woman's influence close by? No. Absolutely not. Before she could continue her tirade, I stood up. Slow. Steady. Controlled. Let me get dessert. She laughed. Dessert. After that little scene. How adorable. But she didn't understand. Dessert wasn't dessert. Dessert was a door. A door into the second phase of my plan. You ever stand in your own kitchen and feel the walls vibrating with your heartbeat? That's how it felt as I stood there, hands resting on the counter, breathing slowly. Because I knew what I needed to do. I knew it had to be tonight. Revenge delayed is revenge diluted, and I wasn't about to offer her anything less than full strength. I opened the drawer that held my backup keys, the ones she didn't know existed, and ran my fingers over the metal. My plan wasn't about violence. It wasn't about yelling or throwing things. It was about something far more powerful. Truth. Truth, when delivered the right way, destroys a person from the inside out. And I knew something about her. Something my son didn't know. Something my daughter-in-law didn't know. Something she didn't expect me to reveal tonight. I had kept it quiet for months because I hoped, foolishly, that it wouldn't come to this. But the woman who spit on my plate had no idea how close she was to showing the entire world who she really was. And tonight I wasn't keeping her secrets anymore. When I returned to the table, I set down the dessert, a warm apple crumble with vanilla ice cream, and placed an extra serving in front of her. She raised an eyebrow. Trying to impress me now? No, I said. Just giving you something sweet. You'll need it. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. The first crack in her confidence. We ate in silence. My son and his wife went home shortly after, promising to call me tomorrow. The woman stayed behind, as she always did, claiming she wanted to help clean up, but she never lifted a finger. What she really liked was supervising, watching me move around my own kitchen like she owned it. Tonight, though, she lingered even more, pacing with a huff. You embarrassed yourself tonight, she said, folding her arms. Crying over spit. Honestly, Jessica, grow up. I turned to her slowly. You think you embarrassed me? Oh, absolutely. And your reaction only proved my point. My reaction, I said quietly, is just beginning. She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? You came into my home, I continued, and disrespected me in front of my son. You spit on my plate. And you think tonight ends with you walking away untouched? Don't threaten me, she snapped. I don't need to threaten you. What does that mean? It means, I said, stepping closer, that I know. She went pale. Instantly. Like someone yanked the blood straight from her veins. You know what? You know exactly what. She swallowed hard. You don't know anything. I smiled. Don't I? You ever watch a person's face collapse? It doesn't happen all at once. First the mouth twitches. Then the forehead tightens. Then the eyes dart back and forth like trapped animals. That's what she looked like. A trapped animal finally realizing the cage had been there all along. I don't know what you think you know, she whispered. I know about the money, I said calmly. The account. The transfers. The lies. She gasped so loudly she slapped a hand over her mouth. And, I added, I know what you did to cover it up. Her knees actually buckled. She gripped the counter. You can't tell them. You can't tell my daughter. You can't tell anyone. Why not? I asked gently. After all, you love exposing people's flaws. Why not your own? Please, she whispered. You don't understand. Oh, I understand better than you think. Her voice broke. You wouldn't ruin me. You ruined yourself, I replied. Tears welled in her eyes, real ones, not the crocodile kind she used whenever she wanted sympathy. This was fear. Raw fear. The kind that eats people alive. And I let her stand there in it. Sit, I said. She obeyed instantly, like a child being scolded. I sat across from her, watching her shake. You've spent months belittling me, I said. Insulting my home. Mocking my cooking. Calling me classless. Tonight, you spat on my plate like I was beneath you. She wiped her eyes. I'm sorry. No. You're scared. She looked away. But don't confuse the two, I added. She choked on a sob. What do you want from me? Tonight. I said. I want nothing. Not yet. Then why tell me you know? To watch you sit with it, I said softly. To watch you realize that the woman you thought was weak is the one holding your future. Her breath hitched. Please don't tell my daughter. She'll never forgive me. That, I said, standing up, depends entirely on what you do next. What do you mean? You'll find out tomorrow. She looked like she wanted to beg, but I walked her to the door without another word. Her body trembled as she stepped outside. Just before I closed the door, she whispered, please be merciful. I smiled. Mercy, I said, is for people who don't spit on my plate. And I closed the door. I leaned against it for a moment, breathing slowly, feeling the weight of what was coming settle into a sharp, delicious pressure in my chest. The truth I held wasn't just powerful. It was explosive. And the best part. She had no idea that her biggest secret wasn't the only one I knew. Because tomorrow was when the real revenge would begin. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just confront her. I would dismantle her, piece by trembling piece. And she would finally understand that some lessons don't just sting. Some lessons scar. You ever try to sleep with a storm raging inside you? One that feels too electric to quiet down? That was me the moment I lay in bed that night. My body was still, but my mind was a battlefield where every memory of her insults marched in formation, each one reminding me exactly why tomorrow had to be the day I delivered her reckoning. Not slowly, not gently, but precisely, intentionally, and in a way she would feel every single time she closed her eyes for the rest of her life. I stared at the ceiling with one thought pulsing through me. She thought she got away with it. She walked out trembling, yes, but she still believed she had a choice. She still thought she could negotiate her way out of the truth. She didn't yet understand the kind of woman I was. 57 years old, yes, but age doesn't weaken you when life has sharpened you for decades. Age becomes armor, not a burden. Experience becomes a blade. She didn't know that I had been gathering every piece of information about her for months. She didn't know I had quietly collected everything she tried to bury. And she didn't know that tonight wasn't the revenge. Tonight was just the spark. The fire would come in the morning. When dawn broke, the sunlight slid across my floor like a warning. I got up with a calmness that almost surprised me, like my body knew exactly what needed to happen. I brewed my coffee, but I didn't drink it. Instead I stood there staring out the window, wondering how it must have felt for her to wake up today knowing she wasn't safe anymore. Did she lie awake all night? Did she imagine the walls closing in? Did she realize that one wrong word, one wrong move, one wrong breath could expose everything she'd been hiding? Good. She needed that fear. Fear makes people honest. It makes them humble. It makes them tell the truth, the same truth they would rather die than admit. The phone rang at 9:04 a.m. I didn't need to check the caller ID. I knew it was her. I let it ring twice before answering, just to let her panic build. Hello, I said softly. Her voice burst through the line, shaky and desperate. Please, can we talk? Not like last night. I didn't sleep. I can't think. I need to know what you're planning. What I'm planning? I repeated. That's interesting. You didn't seem to care what your actions planned for me. I know. Her voice broke. I know. I was wrong. I was horrible. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking very clearly, I corrected. You knew exactly what you were doing when you spit on my plate. She sobbed. I'm sorry. I swear, I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't clean a filthy heart, I replied. Meet me at my house in an hour. She inhaled sharply. Why? What are you going to do? An hour, I repeated, and hung up. I sat down with my cold coffee and exhaled slowly. She thought meeting me might give her answers. She had no idea that today wasn't about answers. Today was about exposure. The kind of exposure that tears the masks off people who believe themselves untouchable. An hour later, I heard her knocking, quick, frantic, like a woman running from her own shadow. When I opened the door, her face looked hollow, drained, as if fear had eaten through her overnight. Come in, I said. She stepped inside cautiously, like she thought the floor might collapse under her. And in a way, it would. Sit down, I told her. She obeyed instantly, her hands shaking so badly her purse nearly fell off her lap. You said you know about the money, she whispered. Please, don't tell my daughter. She'll never forgive me. You mean she'll never forgive what you did to her? I replied, watching her flinch as if I'd slapped her. I needed that money, she whispered. I wasn't trying to hurt her. Yet you did. She looked down, tears falling. I didn't know how to stop it. That's always the story with people like you, I said. You don't know how to stop. But you know how to hide. You know how to lie. You know how to make others look like the villains while you wipe your hands clean. Her shoulders shook. I'm begging you. Please. I'll do anything. That's the part you don't understand, I replied. I don't want your anything. I want your truth. And you are going to give it. She looked up, terrified. What does that mean? It means, I said, leaning in slightly, that your daughter and my son deserve to know the truth about who is going to be part of their child's life. She gasped. No, no, please, not in front of them. Not like that. You should have thought about that, I whispered, before you spit at me, before you insulted me, before you tried to humiliate me, before you believed you were better than me. She swallowed hard, voice trembling. Jessica, please. I didn't mean any of it. Oh, you meant every word, I said. But your mistake wasn't the insult. Your mistake was forgetting that I'm not weak. I don't bow. And I don't forget. She shook her head, crying harder. Please, don't do this. I already decided last night, I said. You handed me the weapon when you opened your mouth. I'm just aiming it where it belongs. Her voice cracked. Why are you doing this? I'm doing this, I said slowly, because you need to learn that spitting on someone else's dignity will cost you your own. She clasped her hands together. Please, let me fix it. Can you return the money? She froze. Can you undo what you did? She shook her head, silently, ashamed. Then you can't fix anything. She began sobbing, loud, uncontrollable, but I didn't move. Her tears weren't my responsibility. They were her consequences. You will come with me, I said. Where? She whispered. To my son and your daughter, I replied. You will tell them everything. She stood abruptly. No, I can't. I can't face them with this. Please, please, don't make me. You think I care about your comfort? I snapped. You didn't care about mine when you spat on my plate. You didn't care about mine when you insulted me. You didn't care about mine when you called me classless. Her knees buckled again, and she sank into the chair like a defeated animal. Please. I'll do anything. Anything except that. That, I repeated, is exactly why it has to be that. She covered her face. You're going to ruin my relationship with my daughter. You ruined it, I reminded her. I'm just turning on the light. She cried harder, her breath hitching, breaking, begging. But the truth is simple. She was never afraid of being exposed because of guilt. She was afraid of losing her control over them. She thrived off dominance, manipulation, superiority. But now that she was cornered, she turned into a trembling heap of fear. I stepped back. Get up. She obeyed. We're leaving now, I said. Your daughter needs to see who the grandmother of her child really is. She froze again. Please, she whispered, voice cracking. Don't use the baby against me. The baby isn't a weapon, I said. But the truth. That's something you forged yourself. When we arrived at my son's house, my daughter-in-law opened the door, confused to see her mother standing behind me with swollen eyes and shaking hands. What happened? She asked. Your mother, I said calmly, has something to tell you. The woman grabbed my arm, nails digging in. Please, not yet. Give me time. No more time, I said. She closed her eyes slowly, as if preparing for an execution, and faced her daughter. I need to tell you something, she whispered, voice barely holding together. Something I've been hiding. Something you won't like. My daughter-in-law's face fell, concern mixing with dread. What is it, Mom? The woman looked at me, as if praying I'd save her. I didn't blink. She turned back to her daughter, trembling. I took money. From you. 4 months. And I lied about it. And I did something terrible with it. And I tried to hide it. And she knows everything. Silence slammed into the room so hard it felt like the air disappeared. My son's face hardened. My daughter-in-law covered her mouth, stepping back, heartbroken. You did what? She whispered. Her mother collapsed into a sobbing mess, falling to her knees. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I just needed. No, her daughter snapped. You wanted. You didn't need. And you lied to me. over and over. My son stepped in front of me, as if shielding me. "Mom, why didn't you tell us sooner?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "I wanted her to tell you herself." He nodded slowly, understanding. But the woman, she stared up at me with something new in her expression. Not fear. Not shame. Something else. Something darker. Something dangerous. And in that moment, with her knees on the floor and her secret spilling out, I realized she wasn't done. Not even close. She looked at me like she finally understood who I was. But she also looked at me like she wasn't going down alone. And the next words she whispered weren't for her daughter. They were for me. "You shouldn't have done this," she hissed softly. "You have no idea what you've started." And just like that, I knew part 2 of my revenge wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a war she thought she could win. You won't believe what I felt in that moment the door clicked shut behind her, because the silence in that room didn't feel like silence at all. It felt like the tightening coil of a trap finally ready to spring. You know that feeling when you're seconds away from revealing something you've waited years to expose? That was crawling through my veins as I stood there alone, realizing the woman who spat on my plate, humiliated me in my own house, and treated me like some disposable maid had absolutely no idea what was waiting for her. And the crazy part, she walked right into it with her own greed, her own arrogance, her own conviction that she could command any room she entered. But she forgot one thing. You don't play a game of power in my home without learning who truly holds the cards. Because as soon as she left that room, I knew something she didn't. She thought she had won. She thought my silence meant surrender. She thought her tantrums, her insults, her venomous little rituals of dominance had finally broken me. But she had no clue that every insult she threw, every cruel gesture she made, every moment she tried to reduce me was fuel, stacking into something far more dangerous than she ever imagined. She didn't know she had been feeding the fire that would burn her pride to ashes. And as I looked around the quiet room, I could still hear echoes of my son's words from earlier, asking me if I was sure, asking me if we should keep going with this plan. But I didn't feel uncertainty. I didn't feel fear. I felt something sharper, something purposeful. I felt the kind of clarity that only comes when someone crosses a line so deep you have no choice but to strike back. She spat on my plate. She spat on the plate that I paid for, in the house I built, at the table I raised my son around. You don't walk away from that without consequences. So when I walked out into the hallway, I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I didn't look over my shoulder. I moved with the calm of a woman who knows every piece on the board is already where she wants it. And as I stepped into the living room, I saw her, sitting there like a queen on a throne she didn't deserve, legs crossed, chin raised, eyes scanning the room like she owned every inch of it. But she didn't notice the small red light glowing beneath the edge of the bookshelf. She didn't notice the tiny microphone clipped nearly invisible under the table where she had spat earlier. She didn't notice that the son she thought she controlled, manipulated, and molded to her will was sitting across from her, trembling not from fear, but from anger. And she certainly didn't notice the way I slid quietly into the room, hands resting calmly at my sides, heart beating slow, steady, deliberate. She thought the night was ending. She had no idea it was only beginning. "You took long enough," she said with that same dismissive wave of her hand, the one she used on waiters, on clerks, on anyone she believed was beneath her. "I assume dinner is ruined, but honestly, it looked pathetic to begin with." Every word from her mouth dripped with the same poisonous entitlement she had poured over me since the day I met her. But tonight, I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I didn't give her the satisfaction of rising to her bait. Instead, I glanced at my son, and for the first time, I saw something new in his eyes, realization. Cold, dawning realization. He looked at her differently now. He looked at her like a man seeing a monster he once mistook for a person. But she didn't see it. She was too busy hearing her own voice echo through the room. "So," she continued, crossing her arms with that smug tilt of her jaw, "are we finally going to address the real issue? Your lack of manners. Your lack of standards. Your lack of respect for me. You ever see someone so blind to reality you almost feel sorry for them? Almost. Because in that moment, I realized something crystal clear. She truly believed she was untouchable. She believed that no matter what she said or did, she would walk away unscathed. She didn't know how wrong she was. I leaned against the wall, folded my arms slowly, and simply said, "Funny. I was thinking the same thing." She blinked. Just once. A tiny stutter in her expression, barely noticeable, but I caught it. For the first time all evening, she was off balance. She didn't like that. "What are you implying?" she snapped, voice sharpening like a blade. But before I could speak, my son leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on hers. And his voice, usually so soft, so patient, came out low, cold, steady. "I think we should all talk about respect, actually," he said. "Especially after what happened at dinner." She stiffened. Her hands tightened on her lap. Her gaze flicked between us. She felt something changing, shifting, slipping out of her grip. And she was right. Because when I walked over to the coffee table and placed the small remote control beside her, she stared at it like it was a foreign object. "What is that?" she demanded. I didn't answer. Instead, I pressed the button. And the moment her own voice filled the room, harsh, condescending, dripping with cruelty, something inside her snapped. She jolted back as if she'd seen a ghost. Because she wasn't hearing my voice. She wasn't hearing my son's voice. She was hearing her own. Her words from earlier. Her insults. Her humiliation. Her mocking laughter. Her spit hitting my plate. Every vile moment she thought no one would remember, played back to her in perfect clarity. "Turn that off," she shrieked, shooting to her feet. "How dare you record me?" But I didn't stop it. I walked around the table slowly, deliberately, letting the recording fill the air like a courtroom verdict. "You think you can come into my home," the recording echoed, her voice sneering, "and embarrass me with your cooking? This is disgusting. I wouldn't feed this to a dog." She lunged for the device, but my son stepped between us, blocking her path. "Sit down," he said, voice firm, final. And the shock on her face, oh, it was priceless. Because no one, not her husband, not her own children, not even the world she bulldozed through every day, had ever told her to sit down like that. Like an order. Like a boundary. She froze. And then she sank back into the couch, trembling with rage. "This is manipulation," she spat. "You tricked me." "No," my son said, shaking his head slowly. "You exposed yourself." The room went silent except for her own voice still playing in the background. Her insults, her threats, her pride shredding itself piece by piece. "I won't listen to this," she snapped, covering her ears. "You already did," I replied. "When you said it the first time." She looked at me with something I had never seen in her eyes before. Fear. Not fear of me hurting her. Not fear of being embarrassed. No. It was fear of losing the only power she thought she had. Her control. Her authority. Her ability to manipulate and dominate everyone around her. She realized it was slipping. And I wasn't done. Because the real revenge wasn't the recording. No. That was just the key to the door. The real moment was walking through it. "Do you know what's worse than the words you said?" I asked her quietly. "The fact that you believed them. The fact that you felt entitled to treat me like garbage in my own home. The fact that you thought there would be no consequences." She glared at me through clenched teeth. "You think this will change anything? My daughter will never believe you. No one will believe you. I will ruin." "You already ruined yourself," I interrupted. And then I picked up the envelope from the table. The one she didn't know existed. The one containing proof she thought she buried years ago. Her face went pale. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. But I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because the panic in her voice told me everything. She knew exactly what was inside. My son looked confused, glancing between us, the tension in the room thick enough to choke on. "What is that?" he asked quietly. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her lips trembled, her eyes darted toward the door, the wall, the window, anywhere but the truth. I held the envelope out to my son. "Read it," I said. "No," she screamed, lunging again. But she was too slow this time, too desperate, too unsteady. He snatched the envelope before she could reach it. And as he slid the papers out, her legs buckled. She sank to her knees, hands clasping together, breath trembling. "Please," she whispered. "Don't." Her voice cracked. Her pride shattered. Her mask fell. For the first time since I met her, she wasn't a queen. She wasn't a tyrant. She was just a woman terrified of being seen. But it was too late. Because the truth had been hidden long enough. My son looked down at the papers in his hands, the document she never wanted him to see, and his entire expression changed. Slowly, deeply, devastatingly. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. His hands shook. "Is this true?" he asked her, voice barely more than a whisper. She didn't answer. She couldn't. He looked at me, searching my face for confirmation, for denial, for anything to anchor himself to. And I nodded. Just once. Her whole body crumpled. He looked back at her, eyes dark. "You did this," he demanded. And the silence that followed was louder than any scream. Because he already knew the answer. And so did she. And now, nothing would ever be the same again. The recording ended. The room fell into stillness. But the night was only getting started. Because revenge, real revenge, is never just about payback. It's about revelation. And she was about to face the most devastating truth of her life. You won't believe how the air changed in that moment, because the silence wasn't just silence anymore. It was accusation. It was betrayal. It was the heavy thud of a truth finally clawing its way out of the dark. You could feel it crawling up the walls, sinking into the floorboards, pressing against our chests like a weight none of us were ready to carry. My son stood there with those papers trembling in his hands, staring at the woman he once thought was just an overbearing mother-in-law but now saw as something far darker, far more dangerous. And she was staring back at him, eyes wide, lips quivering, her entire body folding inward like someone trying to hide from their own shadow. You ever see a person realize their lies no longer have legs to stand on? That second right there was the collapse, the moment when her kingdom of manipulation finally cracked open. And she knew it. She knew the walls she built out of threats, guilt, and control were dissolving right in front of the one person she swore would never see through them. My son's voice cut through the stillness first, low and trembling in that way that tells you a heart is breaking in real time. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked her. "Why would you hide something like this? Why would you keep this from us?" She reached out a shaking hand toward him like she could pull back the truth with her fingers, like she could rewrite history if she just grabbed hard enough. "Sweetheart, I can explain." "No," he snapped, pulling his arm away like her touch was fire. "Not this time. No more excuses. No more stories. No more twisting things to make yourself look innocent." Her mouth fell open, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked truly, painfully small. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the moment unfold, because revenge isn't about screaming the loudest. It's about giving someone just enough rope to tangle themselves beyond saving. He shook the papers in his hand. "You lied," he whispered. "All these years. And you lied." "I did it for you," she insisted, voice breaking. "Everything I've ever done was for you, to protect you, to make sure you didn't get hurt." "Protect me," he repeated, a bitter laugh cracking from his throat. "Protect me from what? The truth? Or from the consequences of your own actions?" She flinched. Because she knew he wasn't wrong. He looked down at the documents again, reading the same paragraph over and over like he couldn't believe his eyes, like the ink might rearrange itself into something kinder if he stared long enough. But it wouldn't. Truth doesn't bend. Truth doesn't soften. Truth cuts. And as he stood there clutching those papers, I could see the cuts forming, deep, jagged ones slicing into everything he thought he knew about the woman kneeling in front of him. She tried to speak again, tried to scrape together whatever dignity she had left, but the words tangled in her throat. I watched her swallow hard, watched her fight the panic clawing at her insides, watched her try to rebuild a mask that had completely shattered. "You don't understand," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I did what any mother would have done." "No," he said sharply. "No, you didn't." And then he looked at me, a long, painful look. The kind of look that asks a question without ever needing to speak it out loud. A question I knew he'd been carrying for years, a question she'd silenced, a question that this moment had finally forced into the light. "Is it true?" he asked me quietly. "Everything in here, is it true?" I didn't look away. I didn't hesitate. I nodded once, slowly, steady as stone. His shoulders sagged. The weight hit him so hard I swore I heard the breath leave his chest. And she watched it happen with this growing horror, her hands trembling so violently she had to grip the edge of the couch to hold herself upright. "You should have told me," he whispered to her. "You should have trusted me." "I was trying to protect you," she cried again, voice cracking under the strain. He stared at her like he was finally seeing the real woman behind every calculated smile and every forced hug. "Protect me from a lie you created? Protect me from the truth you buried? You didn't protect me. You controlled me." Her breath hitched. She shook her head, clutching her chest like the words were knives. "I'm your mother. You're supposed to believe me. You're supposed to stand by me." He leaned forward, face inches from hers, voice low and devastatingly calm. "Then why didn't you stand by me, Mom? Why didn't you trust me with the truth? Why didn't you treat me like a son instead of your puppet?" She froze, her fingers curled, her lip trembled. Because she had no answer. And the silence that followed was the loudest confession she could have ever made. I stepped forward then, not to gloat, not to add more fuel. Revenge doesn't need shouting. Revenge just needs the truth to breathe. "You built your power on secrets," I said softly. "But secrets don't stay buried forever. Not when they hurt people." She turned toward me slowly, eyes red, face twisted with a fear she couldn't hide anymore. "You did this," she whispered. "You planned this. You waited for the perfect moment to humiliate me." "No," I replied. "You humiliated yourself when you spat on my plate. When you lied. When you manipulated everyone around you. I didn't need to trap you. You walked into the truth all on your own." She shook her head violently. "This is your revenge. You've wanted this from the beginning." "My revenge," I said, stooping down slightly, "is the truth. Nothing more, nothing less." My son stared at the two of us, eyes dark, breath uneven. And I knew something inside him was shifting, aligning, awakening. He turned to her again. "How long were you going to hide this from me?" he asked. Her silence answered for her. He clenched the papers tighter, knuckles white. "You destroyed relationships. You ruined opportunities. You manipulated decisions I didn't even know were being made." "I was trying to guide you," she insisted desperately. "I was trying to protect our family image." "Image," he repeated, voice cracking. "You cared more about reputation than reality." She stood suddenly, chest heaving, eyes blazing with that same entitlement that had ruled her for decades. "I did what needed to be done. And you will thank me one day, you'll see." "No," he said, stepping back. "The only person who benefited from your lies was you." Her mouth snapped shut. And that was when she realized she had finally lost him. She reached out again, voice trembling. "Please. I'm still your mother. You can't turn away from me because of one mistake." "One mistake," he echoed. "This was not one mistake. This was years of manipulation. Years of control. Years of pretending you knew best. Years of pretending everyone else was below you." Her jaw tightened, pride trying to resurrect itself. "I did what any mother." He cut her off sharply. "Stop saying that. Good mothers don't lie. Good mothers don't hide the truth. Good mothers don't destroy trust." She gasped, wounded. And I knew something inside her, something she held onto like armor, cracked clean in half. He took a long breath, then said the words she feared most. "I need space from you." Her knees buckled. It was like watching a monument crumble, years of arrogance, superiority, and venom falling into dust at her feet. "No," she whispered. "You don't mean that. You can't mean that." But he did. Because when he looked at her, he didn't see the woman who raised him. He saw the woman who deceived him. He saw the woman who humiliated me. He saw the woman who tore our family apart long before she spat on my plate. He pocketed the papers, walked around her slowly, deliberately, like stepping out of a cage he never realized he'd been trapped in. She reached for him as he passed. "Please, don't go." He pulled away, and she collapsed back onto the couch, trembling, face buried in her hands. He came to me then. And when he wrapped his arms around me, I felt it, the shift, the truth, the clarity. He wasn't confused anymore. He wasn't torn anymore. He knew exactly who had stood by him, who had protected him, who had told him the truth, who had loved him without conditions. And as he held on to me, I whispered something I had waited years to say. "It's time to free yourself." He nodded against my shoulder. But the night wasn't over. Not yet. Because revenge isn't complete until the person who caused the damage finally understands the depth of what they've done. And tonight, she had only tasted the beginning. There was still one truth left. Point one she never saw coming. Point one she never imagined would surface. And when it hit, it would change everything. You won't believe how the energy in that room shifted the moment my son stepped away from her, because it wasn't just the breaking of control, it was the death of her entire identity. You could almost hear the crack echo through the silence, like something ancient inside her had finally snapped under the weight of its own lies. She lifted her head slowly, staring at him with this hollow, terrified look, as if she suddenly realized he wasn't the boy she could intimidate anymore. He wasn't the puppet she had molded. He wasn't the obedient son she had caged in guilt since childhood. He was a man, and he saw her clearly now. You ever watch someone lose the last thing they ever thought they'd lose? Their influence. Their power. Their grip on a life they engineered like a careful lie? In that second, she wasn't the intimidating mother-in-law anymore. She was just a woman who'd finally run out of places to hide. But she still had one thing left: denial. And she clung to it like a drowning person clings to a sinking ship. She stood, wiped her tears, and straightened her blouse like she could fix the truth with fabric and posture. "I know you're angry," she whispered, voice shaky but trying hard to sound composed. "But you're misunderstanding everything. If you would just let me explain." He turned toward her slowly. "I've spent my whole life listening to your explanations," he said. "And every one of them was a lie dressed as love." She opened her mouth, but the words died before they could escape. Because he wasn't yelling. He wasn't emotional. He wasn't pleading. He was calm. And calm truth is deadlier than anger. She took a step forward. "I made sacrifices you will never understand. Do you think your life just happened? Do you think things fell into place on their own?" He stared at her with this expression that was half heartbreak, half disgust. "You didn't make sacrifices. You made decisions for me. You played God with my life, and you never once stopped to ask if I wanted any of it." Her breathing quickened. She reached for him again, but he stepped back, and that small movement shattered her. It was the first time he'd physically rejected her in his entire life. And she knew there was no coming back from that. I watched her chest rise and fall, panic twisting her face. She turned to me then, and in her eyes, I finally saw it, the fear of losing everything she built her identity around. "Please," she said to me softly, voice trembling with desperation. "Help me talk to him. He trusts you. Tell him I'm not a bad person." I kept my gaze steady. "I don't need to tell him anything," I said. "He's finally seeing you for who you are." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You hate me," she whispered. "You've always hated me." "No," I said calmly. "I don't hate you. I hate what you've done." She shook her head, backing up like she was trying to escape a truth that wouldn't stop chasing her. "You turned him against me. You've been waiting for this moment. You've been waiting to destroy me." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I didn't turn him. You exposed yourself." Her breathing grew ragged. But something else flickered in her eyes. Not sorrow, not guilt, but something darker. Defiance. She lifted her chin slightly. "You think this changes anything? He's still my son. Blood is blood. He will forgive me. He always does." My son stiffened. He stared at her like she just slapped him with the very arrogance that had ruled his life. "No," he said quietly. "Not this time." Her face dropped. He continued, voice steady but edged with finality. "This isn't about blood. This is about respect. About trust. About how you've treated the people in my life like obstacles instead of human beings." She took another shaky step toward him. "I only wanted the best for you." "No," he corrected softly. "You wanted the best for yourself." Her mouth tightened, and I saw the truth hit her like a blow, because deep down, she knew he was right. But the shock on her face wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because the final truth, the one she had no idea was coming, wasn't spoken by me. It wasn't spoken by my son. It came from behind her, in a voice that made her spine stiffen and her hands freeze mid-air. "Actually," the voice said, "she wanted the best for her version of you." She spun around so fast she nearly tripped. And standing in the doorway was her own daughter. Her daughter-in-law, her victim. The girl she had dismissed, humiliated, manipulated, and broken piece by piece. She had heard everything. My son's wife stood there with her arms crossed, her face pale but steady, her eyes filled with years of swallowed pain. She stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than thunder. Her mother's lips trembled. "Honey, I didn't know you were home." "I noticed," the daughter replied coldly. The woman's knees wobbled again. "You weren't supposed to hear any of this." "But I did," her daughter said. "And for once, I'm glad." You could feel her mother's panic wash through the room, thick and suffocating. She reached out with a trembling hand. "Sweetheart, please listen. I did everything for you too. Everything." Her daughter's eyes hardened. "No. You did everything for control. You never cared about me. You never cared about my marriage. You only cared about being the center of everyone's life." Her mother's breath caught in her throat. The daughter stepped forward, voice cracking but strong. "I have spent years trying to be the daughter you wanted. But nothing was ever enough. Not my cooking, not my job, not my home, not my choices, not my relationship. You picked at everything. You ruined everything." "I tried to guide you," her mother whispered. "No," the daughter snapped. "You tried to own me." Her mother stumbled back like the words had struck her physically. And then, like a final blade cutting through the last thread, her daughter reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. She held it up. "I wasn't going to show this tonight. But you deserve to see it now." Her mother's eyes widened. What is that?" "It's the one thing you can't manipulate," her daughter said. "It's the truth." She handed the envelope to my son, and he unfolded it slowly, reading the contents with widening eyes. Then he passed it to me. And as I read the paper, something in me froze. Because it was the final piece. The missing link. The answer to every question. The proof of every suspicion. It was a legal document. Signed, stamped, official. A statement from the daughter's doctor, a medical evaluation, a note explaining something his mother-in-law had hidden from everyone for years. Her mother's voice shook violently. "Where did you get that?" "You left it in your desk," the daughter said. "The one you said I should never open. And now I know why." Her mother staggered forward. "Give it to me." "No," her daughter said firmly. "I've already made copies." Her mother's face fell into a mask of horror. My son took a sharp breath and looked at his mother with pure disbelief. "You lied to us about this too." She shook her head desperately. "I can explain." But it didn't matter. Because the truth was clear. Her mother had forced her daughter into something years ago. Something medical. Something hidden. Something she didn't want anyone to know. It was the ultimate control. The ultimate violation. My son looked at the paper again, shaking his head in anger and heartbreak. How could you? How could you do something like this to your own daughter?" Her mother reached out, sobbing. "I was trying to protect her future." "No," her daughter said sharply. "You were trying to protect your future. Your reputation. Your image. And you stole my choices to do it. Her mother collapsed to her knees. Tears streaming, hands shaking, words choking in her throat. But the room no longer belonged to her. She had lost control. She had lost her children. She had lost her audience. My son stepped back. I'm done. We're both done. Until you get help, until you face what you've done, you are not welcome in our lives. Her mother gasped, shaking her head violently. You can't do this to me. But he could. Because the truth is the one thing even a master manipulator cannot outrun. She reached for her daughter next. Please. But her daughter stepped away too. I need healing. You're not part of that anymore. Her mother broke. Completely. Utterly. Irreversibly. And as she sobbed on the floor of my living room, the three of us stood united for the first time. Three people who had been pitted against each other for years by one woman's obsession with control. But no more. My son finally exhaled, shoulders relaxing. Mom, he said softly, turning to me, thank you. You were right to expose her. You were right to protect us. You were right to show us the truth. I touched his shoulder gently. Truth is the only revenge that lasts. He nodded. And together, we walked out of the room, leaving the woman who had caused decades of pain to face the one thing she feared most. Herself. The door closed behind us. And just like that, her reign was over. But here's the thing I want you to understand. This wasn't just a story of revenge. This was a story of clarity, of seeing the truth for what it is, of breaking the chains that people disguise as love. And if you've ever dealt with someone who used manipulation as a weapon, someone who tried to control you with guilt, fear, or obligation, then you know exactly what this victory feels like. So I'll leave you with the same question I always ask. Where are you joining us from? And what time is it where you are? And never forget this. Revenge isn't always about getting even. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is giving someone the truth they cannot twist, outrun, or bury. Because truth is the one punishment no manipulator survives.